The book that changed my life is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And in honor of it, my first tattoo is actually the word present on my right wrist. And I know that a few months ago, you were considering getting the mantra "Be Here Now" tattooed on your forearm. And I'm wondering, why is that message so important to you? And also, did you decide to get the tattoo?
Dude, I don't know where you found that. I feel like I just told one of my close friends that. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, so Be Here Now is a book by Ram Dass, and he's a spiritual teacher that I've gotten pretty deep into over the past 6 or so months. Um, and being present was something that I struggled with for a long time, as I think a lot of people in the modern world do. I was always chasing and looking ahead, especially like high school football, looking ahead to college. And I wasn't fully there in high school football or even in college. I was always looking ahead to when is practice going to be over? When can I go back? And I always had an inability to really connect to the present moment. And after I've gone on this, you could call it a spiritual personal growth journey, I realize all that exists is now. And by tattooing that on my wrist, like you did, that would remind me that this is all that exists. I didn't get the tattoo yet. It's still in the back of my head, but yeah, maybe this will reignite that curiosity to go get it.
It's interesting. I was talking to a girl the other day and she has a tattoo on her wrist, but it's facing outwards. And I forget what the message was, but I intentionally got it facing inwards so that I could read it. My other wrist says grateful. And I think those two, the presence and gratitude, are the two things that will basically solve any anxiety or stress. You can't be present, you can't be grateful and also be angry or be sad or anything like that. So presence is really everything. It's the ultimate key. It's become a little bit trite because people say it, but it's because it's true. And yeah, it's super powerful. I spoke to Danny Miranda last week, and he was talking about kind of this idea of going slow. And like you say, looking ahead, always looking to the next thing. And it's like, why not enjoy the process a little bit more and not be so concerned with that next achievement, that next goal? And when you were backpacking Europe, I know you talked about like you saw society kind of like it was just a little bit slower. You know what I mean? It wasn't as go, go, go as it is in the US. Were you able to internalize that state of mind, that state of being? And does that roll over into you being a creator?
Yeah, so I think it definitely had a huge impact on me when I got back. I noticed the first night I went to dinner with my family after I got back, I ate my dinner like half as fast as they did. Like they just ate it really quick. And then I was like kind of chilling and eating it slowly. They're like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, damn, like this is what I've been doing in Europe. Like you're not there for the food as much. You're there for the experience. You're there for the moment. You're there for connection. So I think that had a big impact on me. As far as how it relates to the creator journey, I love what Danny said about going slow. I saw that clip on Twitter or X, and I loved what he said there because we can get so caught up in achievement and chasing and working and living for tomorrow that we forget that today is all that actually exists. And if you could come from that place of today is enough, I'm exactly where I need to be, yet I still want to strive and I still want to achieve, I think you'll go forward from a place of more balance and equanimity than you would if you're like, oh, I just have to go get this, or once I get this, then I'll be satisfied and happy. Like, why can't you be content now, but also want more? So I'm not perfect with it, but that's something I'm trying to remind myself of. And one quick thing back to the tattoos, the only tattoo I have is a yin yang, and I got it in Europe to remind myself of balance. And I think balancing the present moment with striving for the future, that's another main pillar of how I try to think about the world.
You say where I'm supposed to be again with the tattoos. My third so those are my first two on my wrist. My third one, I got a big 27 on my forearm. And that's like, I see it everywhere. Like people have their numbers and stuff, and I'll see it on a license plate or I'll see it on a sign or the time, and it always reminds me I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is the moment, like no matter good or bad, that's exactly how I'm supposed to feel. It's like this route that drives down. And I think that's amazing. And I want to talk a little bit about like identification with like that future person or with the present moment. A lot of people, again, the reason they're looking forward is because they're like, I am this type of person, or I want to get to that point. That's how I see myself. And that can be healthy, but it can also be, it can also change. It's kind of fluid depending on where you're at in life. you had previously identified as an athlete, right? You were a star quarterback in high school, you were a wide receiver at Northwestern. And I'm curious how traveling, I know that experience kind of opened your mind up a little bit, right? Into like who you could be and how you saw yourself. How did that evolve your personal identity?
Yeah, well, when I quit football, which was about a year and a half ago, March 2022, I had no idea who I was, and I was very scared about that. But one thing, in addition to the travel, that helped me navigate that and be okay with that uncertainty was psychedelics. So I was able to come to the decision to quit football after a mushroom trip, and it was the first time I ever did it. I was scared as hell, but my curiosity took me there. And during that trip, I had the download of like, you've thought your whole life that being an athlete is the pinnacle of your existence, but in reality it's actually limiting your potential. Like if you gave away that identity, you could become whoever you want. And so that was very liberating. When I went to go travel, I still didn't know who the hell I was. It's kind of like metaphorical. I was like lost as I was traveling, and I was lost many times when I was traveling, but it was almost freeing to not have to be anybody and not have to live up to any standard and just try to figure out who I was. And through that, through those 2 months of being a broke college kid backpacking through Europe with no responsibilities, I coincidentally stumbled across writing and reading and all of these things that I was never interested in as an athlete. And so I think it's powerful to try to keep your identity small as possible because it keeps you as open as possible to wherever your potential could lie. But when you have that identity constraining you, you're blocking off other potential realities that could be your fullest expression of yourself or the fullest version of yourself.
Yeah, I want to talk about the unknown a little bit as well in a minute. But first, I want to go to this idea of like writing and reading, and that you kind of fell into this creator economy in a way through this exploration of literacy. And I went back and I looked at your first tweet, and something tells me because your account's been open since 2015. Something tells me you probably cleared out some of the old ones, which I did as well with mine. But the first one I could find was from September 1st of 2022, and it said, "Life is full of slippery slopes. You can run 1 mile and eventually run a 100-mile ultra. You can write one page and end up writing a 500-page best-selling novel, but you can also have one beer and 10 years later become an alcoholic. Choose your slopes wisely." And I see
Whoa.
this idea as kind of the intersection between habit formation and time management, intentional time management. Can you unpack this idea of, kind of slopes and choosing your slopes wisely and what that means?
Yeah, so that's pretty cool you pulled that tweet up, and I didn't remember writing that tweet. I might have to repurpose that now because that's actually not bad at all for the first tweet. But what I was
That's
realizing
good.
at the time was I was starting to get into writing. I was starting to get into reading. I was starting to get into running for the first time in my life. And I quickly saw that, okay, I'm going to run a half marathon, but like, what's next? Like, am I going to stop there or am I going to keep going? And I think it's like, whatever you start, you can just continue to progress and go so much further than if you just sit there speculating about it, right? And that's the power of momentum. If you just do one thing, if you just send one tweet, you can create a snowball of momentum that creates an entirely new life for yourself. And when I wrote that tweet, like I was so scared because I had all of my college football teammates following me. I had all of my high school friends and teammates following me. And I remember writing the tweet and I just like cringed so hard and I threw my phone across the room and I'm like, I can't look at this. It's so cringe. And that one tweet led me down the slippery slope of joining the creator economy, making a full-time living, quitting college, and now I'm talking to you. But it just happened from that one decision to just embrace discomfort and be like, okay, I'm just going to do it even though it sucks.
Yeah, well, the decisions that we make, those individual decisions, are so important, and they can open up so many things, especially when you don't feel like you're ready. Do you know what I mean? And like, I want to go to the story that you've told a few times, where you're on a train, you're listening to Lynchpin, this audiobook, and you read this idea that the only reason you're not sharing your ideas with the world is because you're scared what other people are going to think about you, and it resonated with you, and you just wrote your first newsletter right there and told your parents and your friend, a couple friends, like, "Hey, can I just send this to you like every week with all the stuff that I'm learning? Um, how powerful do you think it is to take immediate action like that when inspiration hits us?
It's incredibly important. And a couple ideas come to mind. So I've been reading Rick Rubin's Creative Act, and he talked about an artist, a singer. I can't remember who it was, but they said when the idea for a song comes, write the entire song right there, or else the inspiration will fade. And I think that's super powerful. And it's something I'm trying to capitalize in terms of writing. Like when an idea comes up, if I just write it and store it for later, and then I come back and write it, it just doesn't hit the same way. Whereas in the moment, if I just feel that inspiration, just write it. And like last night, even I was up like way later than I usually am, but I just had that inspiration and I wrote like 5 threads just like in my bed on my iPad because the inspiration was there. So inspiration is, it's never going to last. And so when you feel it, like you just got to ride that wave.
It's like when you get a good idea and then you're like, I'll remember it later. And it's like famous last words. Like if you don't write that shit down, it's gone.
Oh
And
yeah.
especially when it comes to creativity and there's more than just an idea, but it's like a whole, like, I just need to get this out. Um, just tackling it and doing it is so important. I did that with my podcast. Not this podcast, but my first ever podcast. I was in Hollywood. This is in 2017. And I had been having like a few months of just like, I want to start a podcast. I don't know what it's going to be on. I don't know anything, but I want to just talk. I just have things to say. I want to just express myself. And one day on like a Wednesday, I just was like, fuck it. I was just in my apartment. I had nothing to do. And I opened my computer and I just started recording. And the first line on it was something like, I don't know if this is even going to get posted, but fuck it. So what's up? Like that was like the beginning. And I then after I about half an hour later of just talking about my week and about what was on my mind, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do 50 of these, 50 straight weeks, and then see where I get to. And that was like a huge step for me in finding my voice and just learning about myself through expression. I know you just uploaded your 40th podcast today with Dan Goldfield. What's the podcast been like for you? How has it served you as a person and then also as a creator?
Yeah, so I was very similar to you in terms of like wanting to do a podcast for so long. And I'd recorded some in college with like really smart friends. And I've recorded some with friends, but I never got around to posting it just because of that fear of like judgment. And I love what you said about that first line you wrote was, or you said was, I don't know what this is going to become, but I'm just going to do it. And I remember I typed that in my first newsletter. I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to care about this. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm just going to do it. And then you only can iterate and actually get better once you do it. But back to your question about the podcast for me has served as a networking tool more than anything else. Because what I realized early was if I wanted to get on a call with a bigger creator I looked up to and ask them questions and form a relationship and get to know them, they're not going to get on a call with a random college kid with 20 with like actually like 800 followers at the time. And so I was like, okay, what can I make the benefit for them be worth it to actually talk to me? And it was like, if I hop on a podcast, who doesn't love talking about themselves? Who doesn't love sharing their story? And those early connections, like I connected with somebody with like 20,000 followers, then somebody with 30,000 followers. And that one opened my mind to the point of the creators ahead of you are not actually better than you, different than you. They've just been doing it longer. And that gave me a lot of self belief. But things have come really full circle with that podcast. Like I was able to drop out and leave college for 2 reasons. One, a podcast guest, Taylon Simmons, who I met because I asked him to come on my podcast. We became friends, came full circle. He referred me my first client. Then my second client, which allowed me to take the leap, was a podcast guest I had on 6 months prior. And we had a relationship and he'd seen me grow my account and his account was huge and he couldn't handle it all. And we already had the relationship, we had the trust. So he was like, hey, like, would you want to write for me? And so the most powerful part of the podcast is the networking aspect. Now, I think guys like you and Danny Miranda, like your production is really good. Like you are going to grow the podcast. You're like, that's your thing. I think for me, it's more of a tool than the main thing. For me, the main thing feels like writing.
Mm. Yeah. So interesting you say that because for me, it's like I have had this pull to do a podcast, but I also similarly like views and getting it out there and all that is not the main thing. Number one is brand awareness, and number two is networking, a close second. So it's like, do people know that I have a high quality podcast that I do often with great guests? That is enough for me at this stage to be like, this is a huge W. To be like, oh, Greg does that podcast. I actually don't care if you watch. I mean, I want you to watch, but it's not the biggest needle mover. And then the networking is like, man, the people that both of us have had on our podcast are just, they're way further ahead than us. It's just like, and I get to sit down with Kieran Drew or Nicholas Cole or Dickie Bush, and it's like, just pick their brains. It's incredible. I think I actually, the first time I ever came across you was your conversation with Dakota many months ago on YouTube. And yeah, that was the first time I ever saw you. So it worked right away. You've been on my radar for a long time.
Yeah, that first podcast with Dakota, that was like the biggest jump, um, getting him on there. And like this actually speaks to the power of like buying coaching. Um, when you're buying coaching, yeah, you're buying the information, but a subtle benefit, a hidden benefit of that is you're buying the network. And from there, me and Dakota became somewhat of friends, and he came on my podcast. And I remember I was just nervous as hell because like I was looking up to this guy for so long. Him and Dan, their podcast from a long time ago was what got me into the creator economy. And so it came full circle where I was like, oh, I'm talking to this dude one on one. And again, that just helps you shed all those limiting beliefs of like, I can't do it, or these guys are better than me. And yeah, they're way ahead for sure. But you talk to them and you see they're just normal dudes like us. They've just been doing it a long time.
Yeah, they're guys that just saw a white space and then they went after it. They were a little bit earlier than us, but the reality is that we're still really early in this game. And so if we just stay at it and do the right things, put the pieces in place, we're going to make it. And I think you and I are already at that stage in that 20,000 follower range where people are already looking up to us, and we feel like we still have so far to go because we do. But also there's a lot of people behind us that are like, oh, I wish I could get to where they are, the same way we look at like Dakota or Danco or something like that. I did see you post your full podcast episode today to the X feed. These long form over an hour. I love that. I've been doing that. And I've also been doing these listening parties where I take the episodes and then I run them through a space and have the guests sit on stage with me. So we don't have to do anything. We just sit on mute and then I run the episode. We kind of trade followers by just listening to it. I really think that's a great tool for podcasters and you should consider it. I can show you some of the back end stuff that I do. But you and I also did a space the other day, a live space with Laura Nader, and we talked about long tweet strategies and frameworks and writing for X. Are you using spaces, or I guess I should say, like, is spaces a part of your strategy going forward in any way? Do you see value in them? And how do you anticipate you using them?
I definitely see the value, but it's more so like what are the priorities right now? And I've noticed like last week actually, I got a little bit burnt out and I was reflecting on why. And it was because I said yes to 5 spaces and 4 podcasts in 1 week. And I know like that's probably easy money for you, but for me it was a lot. And I'm somebody who's quite introverted in by nature, and I really thrive on having large blocks of time, like say in the afternoon or at night, where I can just be in my room with a Kindle, with my computer, with some music, and just going down rabbit holes and just getting creative. And doing all those spaces kind of took away from that. Now, I still am open to doing spaces for sure. As far as hosting them myself, I don't know as of right now. Um, it's something that I'm open to for sure. I'm not closing it off, but it's just like what is the ROI and what's important right now. And for me, what's important right now is building this course, building this cohort, because that's completely uncharted territory, and then continuing to grow the audience, and just playing the networking game, which I guess spaces would go into that as well. I'm curious, like, what did you talk to Danny Miranda about this? Because I'd be curious to know his perspective on spaces.
He said that if he was starting a podcast today, he would start a space first. That's what he said. And then he also said that his experience right now, the experiences he's had is actually, they've been a bit draining for him as well, because he enjoys the one-on-one and he doesn't like other people chiming in. And then it becomes just a
Yeah.
little more hectic in his brain. I think that plays into kind of like the introverted style, which I'm the same way, honestly.
Damn, that's pretty admirable. You're able to push through it then. And I noticed the one-on-one for me is much more energizing, and it goes back to like the personality, but I just really connect when I'm like one or two people, really deep conversation, really connecting and getting to know each other. I did a space a couple weeks ago, and the first hour was like a one-on-one interview, and I was in flow state. I was walking around outside in the sun, I was going, and then we brought in people to talk, and there was like 20 people chiming in, and I was like, I need to leave. Like, I just need to go in my room.
Yeah, totally. I think it speaks a lot to just like having control of the structure of the show and understanding what you want from it. Because really, the medium itself is pretty powerful. It's flexible, and I do think that it's a great way to build a community. Actually, somebody from my community, I put a question out to my community today if they had any questions for you, and I got a good one from this guy Source, who wanted to know, he's seen you talk about optimism, and there was a reply that you had to somebody's tweet. It said rational optimism was something that you quoted. And I don't know if that's something you've thought deeply about, but he wanted to know what you mean by that. And then how can people like use that in their life and have rational optimism?
Yeah, so I'll be 100% transparent. It's not something I've looked super deep into or have a deep understanding of, but people I look up to and admire seem to understand that philosophy. So it comes from Naval, and it's a book recommendation from Naval called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. And it's basically just like a hedge against pessimism. It talks, I've only read the first couple chapters as well, but what it talks about is if you look at the average person's life across the entire earth versus where it was at 100, 200 years ago, it is incredibly more abundant. We have incredibly more wealth, and humans will just continue to create more wealth and solve our problems into the future. That's evolution. That's the natural process. So that's it, like on a societal aspect. But in terms of maybe a more individual aspect, I think it's just a smart frame of mind to always be optimistic, right? Because if we get into the subconscious and all this stuff, thought creates reality. And if you're expecting things to go wrong, they will. If you're expecting things to go well, they will. And I have a couple personal examples that I look back on that this is true. When I was in high school, I was like, I'm going to Northwestern to play football. And like everybody's like, all right, like you're just some 5'9" white kid. Like, I don't know. But I was so set on it. I was so sure of it, and it manifested into reality. Now I could take the other side of that in college, and I haven't ever shared this before, but the day I tore my ACL, the last time I ever practiced football, I went into that practice thinking like I was really burnt out. I didn't want to be there. I was like, oh, what if I just got hurt? And I was like, no, I don't want to think about that thought. And then that practice, I tore my ACL. And I kind of have chills talking about it because I haven't shared that with anybody. But thought and the mind and the subconscious is so powerful in terms of creating our reality. I don't think we can really understand how important that is. And so ever since that moment, it's just been optimism, optimism. Always expect things to go well because I've seen when they don't.
That's super powerful. It makes me think of kind of tying it back to what we were talking about before with the unknown. And like you have a choice to basically decide how the unknown affects you when we inevitably find ourselves in a place where we're not sure where to go or we don't know what's happening around us. Things get thrown at us and we have to figure out like, how are we going to mentally handle this? How are we going to frame this for ourselves so that we continue in a positive direction? And that goes with the creator economy. It goes with really anything, especially like right now for me, I don't really know what I'm doing, bro. Like I'm just showing up every day and I'm following my energy and I'm talking to people. I'm listening to people. They were the ones that told me, hey, go start this Telegram. And I just started it up and there's a community now. And I've heard you say like, you hear creators like Ali Abdaal say, I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 years. Right. And there's comfort in that. Right. How important do you think it is for people, especially creators, to kind of make friends with the unknown and embrace it?
It's absolutely crucial. And this game we're playing, you can follow a roadmap, you can follow people you're inspired by, you can try to follow in their footsteps. But in reality, when you're playing the niche of one game or you're trying to carve your own path, you're walking on a path that is completely foggy. Like you can only see one step into the future at a time. If you could see what the end of the path was going to be like, you'd be walking on somebody else's path. You'd be walking on a preset path by society. But because we're playing at the edge of this field in this new thing called the creator economy, it's very uncertain. Like, I have no idea where I'll be in 3 to 5 years. And from what I've talked to a lot of bigger creators about, they think the same way. Now, they do start to plan in longer term time horizons. But when you're playing on the edge of a field, you can't know where you're going exactly because nobody's done it before. You're in completely uncharted territory.
Jordan Peterson talks about this like North Star, and that take aim. I forget the exact quote, but it's something like take aim even badly. It's like, it's almost like especially badly. Like, it's going to be bad. You just have to go forward, and it's like a dim light in the distance. And you're like, okay, I'll go there. And then like, as you start to make progress, you're like, oh wait, the light's over there. And and it's kind of like this
Yeah.
zigzag. But even if you end up doing 20 miles of moving, you're still 3 miles and you're only 3 miles forward. You still went 3 miles forward. And you have to do that. Otherwise, because if you stand still, you're actually moving backwards, right? Life doesn't stop for you. So there is no still, there's only backwards or forwards, and it's you're moving forward or you're falling back. And so you have to keep going. And the unknown is such a huge part of people's lives, especially like, again, this creator economy where a lot, we don't know what we're doing. Like, even if you're starting to make a little money or have a little success, it's like, what am I doing? I got laid off from a company at the end of last year. And I had like 5 years before that of just trying to make stuff happen. And I was just in this complete unknown and just thinking I had something and then it falling through and breaking and failing. And when I got laid off, I was like, oh, I'm back home. Like, the unknown for the first time felt like a place of comfort. And I just realized that if I'm just producing things, then good things will happen. And I mentioned the Telegram that came up for me. This was just me showing up in spaces every day and talking to people and building community. And they were like, do this, do this. And I was like, okay, fine. So I did it. And now it's like, all of a sudden over the last 5 or 6 days, I'm like, this is going to be a humongous part of my strategy and the future of my business. And it was just because I embraced like just showing up and just producing. I know that you have a Telegram community. There are not a lot of people using Telegram from X, not enough. There are some, but not enough. And you're doing a good job. You have a few hundred people in your community. You invited me into this Sober October group you're doing to just form other groups and be a leader. How are you using Telegram? What do you think about it? Is it an underrated tool that people should be paying more attention to?
I think it can be extremely powerful. And I almost hesitate to say it because I think it's a little competitive advantage, but we can all win. So that's just a limiting belief. Um, but yeah, I got the idea originally from two guys more in the health space, Noah Ryan and Solbra. And I realized I really resonated with Noah's Telegram in specific because he wasn't just sharing health tips, he was sharing life advice tips. He was like talking in there for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And I noticed he created this like cult of fans where whenever he posts a tweet, he's getting 100 to 500 likes. Like, he has people really keen in on his message and his stuff. And it goes back to this idea originally, it's from Dan Coe about mental real estate. And the more you can hold attention in people's heads, the more profitable and the more impactful your brand is going to become. And so I think having people off X on Telegram listening to your voice notes for, say, a couple minutes a day, and I haven't been as consistent with that as I'd like to be, but if you can just have people listening to your thoughts a couple minutes a day, and then they're listening to your podcast, and then they're listening to your solo podcast, and they're reading your tweets, and then they're reading your 3,000 word newsletter, you're starting to hold a lot of space in their head. And the more you can do that, the more you could stay top of mind. I think the more powerful your influence in your brand and your message can become. I noticed yours is a bit more of like a group chat though, which is, it's cool. It's interactive.
Yeah, so I've started the group chat first, and then as of last night, I started the announcements channel. So it's that one way, that you're talking about, where you can just put out a message and then there's comments. But then I also have the group chat, which people are like memeing each other and stuff. It's a whole big thing, and I can go into that. I'd love to talk to you about that at some point. About it's because I started in spaces, bro. It's because we know each other. I think a lot of people are doing it backwards, and I didn't realize until I'm watching it happen in real time. People are building their community text first, and then they're saying, okay, let's have a call. or something like that, or let's have a Zoom, a group call, or a group whatever. And it's like you're layering in the multimedia or the more like face-to-face or verbal interaction as like a complement to the text conversations. And we did it kind of backwards, where we built like dozens or even hundreds of hours of just talking and knowing each other's pure energies. And then when we move that to text and we're like, oh, now we have an asynchronous place to hang out. And it's like this outpouring of just like, because you know who's talking on the other end. It's not just a PFP, right? It's like an actual person. So it's created this like incredibly vibrant community. But yeah, I see the value in the announcements channel, because I was trying to like say stuff and it would just get washed away within like 20 minutes. And it's like, I need somewhere where I can really just talk to them. But yeah, I love it, dude. It's like, it feels like more of a cousin to X. Like jumping from X to email feels like a big jump. It feels like a business jump almost, whereas Telegram is like a nice segue over into that. And I like how you mentioned the voice notes too. That's a big part of your strategy there, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much any lesson or insight I gain that I'm like, okay, I want to share this. I'll just throw in like a 5 minute voice note off the top of my head. And one, that builds mental real estate. It builds trust, because eventually people, if you want them to buy from you, and it's not all about that, but they need to know, like, and trust you, right? And they're going to be able to do that much more if they hear you talk and they see you're genuine, then you see you want to help people. I think that's huge. And another big part of it is, it's still a skill I'm working on, but speaking is incredibly important. And of course, speaking in spaces and on podcasts is really good for building that muscle. But throwing in a 5 minute voice message off the top of your head with no script, it's really powerful for building your articulation. And I've noticed I've become more articulate in the past couple months I've been doing that. Now I have a long way to go, but it does help build that muscle.
So here's an idea I'll throw out there. I just came up with this last night. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but it made sense to do it, is an audio newsletter. So I feel like these email newsletters are all becoming the same, and they're just like, I'll be honest with you, bro. I'm signed up to a few dozen of them, and I'm at the point where I just click them all and do mark as read. I don't even open them. I don't read them. They're just it's too much. And I know that there's just going to be a story or some sort of bullet points, and then it's a call to action to go do something, and they're all the same. So now I'm doing more of like a kind of what you're doing with the Telegram, but I want to just basically at random times throughout the week, if I have something to say, I'm just going to record a 3 to 5 minute voice note, and I'm just going to send it in an email with nothing else. It's going to have a subject line, and you'll open it and it's just going to say what's on my mind.mp3 or whatever. And you just click it and it plays, and that's literally the whole email. And so it'll probably evolve from that and become more fleshed out. But I like this kind of like cryptic, like there's nothing really happening except just this audio note. I think I'm trying to balance it with the Telegram. It's all happening fast, but I think there's some sort of like like just a different model. Do you know what I mean? Because everyone's kind of doing the same thing, it feels like, with the off-platform stuff.
Yeah, you have to be different somehow. And I think that could lead into your unique strengths, because you're a great speaker and it's something you do all the time, and people are going to come to know your voice. And they'll really resonate with that and connect with you on that. I think the audio is cool. I know my friend Taylor Simmons has played with the idea of doing a video newsletter too. I think you have to separate yourself in some way. And the way I'm personally trying to do it is with depth. And not as many people want to maybe read that, but that's okay. I think it comes back full circle to like my end goal and idea is being a writer. And if I could write 3,000, 4,000 word newsletters every week and really hold that depth and develop my ideas, one, it's building my writing skills. So eventually when I go on and want to write a book, I'll have a lot of ideas already fleshed out. But I mean, I look back to when I was in college. Why did I get into the creator economy? Why did I find all this? It was Dan Koh's newsletter. I would get that thing every Saturday and I would love reading it. And it was like 10 to 15 minute read, and it had so much depth and it had so much value in there. And I think maybe now that we're on the other side of the arena, we're in the arena. Like we don't need to read all these emails. But when you're on the outside of the arena, reading those emails is like a form of entertainment, and it's something that you can really look forward to, versus now we're so busy with messages and all this stuff. It's hard to find time. So I think the overarching point is you have to find a way to differentiate yourself. And I think you do that by leaning into your unique strengths. For me, I think it's writing. For you, I think it's audio. You just have to find what it is for you.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. Like if you like for me, it was getting difficult to write the emails. I did like 9 of them in a row, like 9 weeks, and I was growing and people were liking it. I hated doing them, man. I hated it. And it's not that I don't like writing. I just didn't like email. I like writing tweets. I like writing like in Telegram, even if it's longer form in the announcement channel. I've been starting to do that with just like, here's an idea, I'm going to put it out, but I don't have to try as hard. I feel like the email is just like so formal and maybe I'm approaching it wrong, but it didn't feel right. But I think for you, if you go deep on that and you love to do it,
Yeah.
then that's awesome. And I think that's where you can build your depth.
Yeah, I do love it. It's like tomorrow morning is when I write my newsletter. I cannot wait. I'm just going to go put on Interstellar soundtrack and just flow for 2 hours. And it's like the highlight of my week. But it's all about playing into your unique strengths. And that idea about sending text in the Telegram channel, you just unlocked something for me because I have all of these like semi mid form to long form Twitter posts sitting in my Notion that might go unused. Why not just put them in a Telegram, see which ones hit, use it as an idea validating source, and then which ones hit, put them on the timeline. That's it. It's so
100%.
obvious. How did I not think of that?
Do you follow Justin Waller's Telegram?
I don't know.
He's got a good one where he probably, I think he has a ghostwriter for it, but like I'll notice like things that he'll say in podcasts or stuff, he'll then repurpose into like quote unquote long form. It's more like medium form, like in a Telegram announcement channel, and then people engage with that idea. Like you said, it could be good for idea validation, even for repurposing old stuff just to keep people engaged, daily motivation. It's a nice thing. But I do think mixing in with the audio is really smart too. And whether you're using email, Telegram, whatever it may be, I think they're both going to be good for monetizing as well, being able to push people to a product or a service. And I've heard you, this is a little while ago, but I heard you talk about scarcity mindset with money. And it was something that you had to deal with at one point. It's something that I deal with, and I've been open about this, and I'm actually seeing a hypnotherapist soon about it because I think that's really interesting. Do you still deal with a scarcity mindset with money, and how do you approach the whole monetization game right now?
Yeah, so it's something I'm definitely working on too. And I'm working through it right now. But a big reason I decided to move back home from the nomading life was being able to operate purely from abundance and not need things from people. That's a huge thing. Like I've gotten on a bunch of calls with bigger creators and done performance coaching with them for free just to build a relationship because that's so valuable in the long run. Like that is going to compound so well. And not being in a place where I need money. However, I saw this tweet 2 days ago from Andrew Kirby. That kid is a genius. I don't know if you know him, but he's a wizard. And he talks about your brain can only focus on one goal at a time. And he's like, if you're focused on audience growth, that's you'll base all your action and behavior around that goal. But if you switch it to monetization, all your action and behavior will form around that goal. And so literally over the past 2 days, I've started to make the mental switch of, okay, the audience growth, I've been doing it for a long time. I think I can continue to do it because I have the systems built out. Now I need to start thinking about monetization more. I need to start thinking about business more. And that's already changing my behavior in the last day, which is crazy. I've realized in the last day, and this is so obvious, but you don't make money just on Twitter. You make money by in the DMs. You make money on Telegram. You make money by talking to people. And in the past day, I signed a coaching client just because I actually went into my DMs and talked with somebody. And it's something that I never do because I haven't been money focused. But now that I want to move out again and I'm going to be in a position where I'll need money again, now my mindset is shifting a little bit. But in terms of abundance and scarcity, I think the main driver in terms of the benefit of thinking from abundance is decision making. Whenever I operate out of scarcity, I just don't make good decisions and I don't think more than a month or two ahead. But when you're thinking out of abundance and you realize I have all I need right now, you can start to think in 3, 6, 12, 24-month time increments. And I think we'll see this as we progress. The best entrepreneurs, the best creators are thinking in 3 to 5 year time increments. Whereas when you're at the start, you're thinking of, okay, how am I going to pay rent next month? And it completely changes how you view the game.
It's interesting because I feel like it overflows if you just do the right things. Like the universe bends over backwards to help you. So like I just never think about monetization, and it's probably to my detriment at some point. But I've just been pouring into my audience. I haven't made an ask yet at all from my audience. Now I've gotten a ton of inbound for coaching. All of a sudden, I have a coaching business where I'm making a decent amount of money, but that was all just from pouring into people. And then the universe is like, hey, here's a bunch of DMs of people saying, will you coach me? And then I had to learn sales, and now I'm building skills around that. And it's like all this positive stuff. But, I do want to monetize my community in a way that, it brings them a ton of value and also brings me value. So I've been thinking about doing a course. And as soon as I flip my mind to like, okay, I'm going to build this course, this Telegram thing happened. And I think that that's going to be the biggest driver into being able to do it successfully, get beta testers, make it really great, and ultimately sell it. So yeah, it's interesting how I just feel like if you just pour into people, then the money will come back to you. And again, I've probably done it a little bit slower than I could have, but back to the beginning of the podcast is like, who said like speed is really the KPI anyway?
I agree. And Hormozy talks about the longer you can give without needing anything in return, the more of an ask you can have. So I don't think necessarily you've gone too slow. I think like if anything, you're in a better position than everybody else because you've gave for so long that when you ask, you probably have 1,000 people that are ready to like buy something from you because they know, like, and trust you so much because of the value you've given them. So I think you're in a great spot. I'm excited to see where you take it.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think Kieran Drew did something very similar. I don't think he made an ask for like a few years, and now this year he's made like 3 asks like every 3 months, and he's just absolutely cleaned up like multi 6 figures. And that's just the game. Especially if you're enjoy like I like just going into spaces and holding space for people to have amazing conversations and for me to be a part of it, become a better speaker, become more open, help people. My goals right now, bro, are basically like work on this community, sell the course, and then make a bag, and then hopefully use that to kind of go on like a world tour next year. And I want to stay with like a bunch of X creators all over the world. And I got to figure out how I want to do that so that it's a content generator as well, and bring value and make money and all that stuff. But I think that's such a cool way to think about it. I'm curious what some of your short-term goals are, some of your medium-term goals, and what are the things that you're most excited about right now?
Yeah, well, one quick thing off that, you should do like a traveling podcast around the world. That would be insane. I could totally see you killing that. In terms of my short term goals, I'm really in the weeds right now of getting ready for my first launch. And so I'll have a video course, a free performance video course that I've been working on for months, hopefully coming out in the next few weeks, and then launching the cohort, aiming for Black Friday. Now, I'm under some self-imposed stress because I'm like, I don't know if I can get this done. And if I can't, okay, whatever, worst case scenario, it happens a month later, but I'm aiming to get that ready for launch on Black Friday, November 24th, which is like 21 days from now. So I got to get my ass into gear. But in terms of medium term goals, keep doing the same things. Eventually, after this cohort is over, having a evergreen community based off that cohort. Maybe it's on Discord, maybe it's on Circle. I haven't got the logistics done yet, but eventually creating this entire ecosystem where you run cohorts, you have a community, you have individual products. Maybe they would be around performance, maybe they'd be around social media. You're omnipresent across platforms. You have a podcast, you start doing YouTube, and then long-term goals. Ever since I started this, and it started with writing, a book has been like the ultimate long-term goal, and that's something I really like in my future. If I could get off of X in like someday and just be able to write, like that would be the ideal reality. So that's how I'm thinking about things right now.
I'm so excited to see what you do, man. Like, I feel like you're just like a little creator prodigy. Like, I think you're way ahead. You're way more mature than your years. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but you have a lot of Dan Co in you, I think, especially with the book goal. That's going to be really great. So I'm excited to see how the cohort goes. Please let me know how I can help with that. And, we should definitely figure out different ways to collaborate. I think we have a lot in common. We're in a very similar spot. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to do the show. I like how your willingness to pivot, in your life and just kind of like take things as they come and stay flexible, and follow your energy. I think that's amazing. And you put in the work, you know what I mean? Ultimately, like you show up, you do the thing, you network. The podcast, most people are just not doing a podcast. I think that's an amazing tool. So really admire you, man. Would love to give you a chance to maybe share a word of encouragement to the audience, anything that's top of mind, maybe something that you've recently read that stuck with you, or anything, a point that is making an impact in your life. And then if you want to point people to anywhere, whether it's the Telegram or something like that, we'll have all the links. So just share those as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate the kind words and I appreciate you having me on. When you asked me, I was like, whoa, this feels really big time. I think you're starting to create that vibe and persona around yourself of like, if you get asked on the Danny Miranda podcast, you're legit. And I think the same thing is happening with yours. So I really appreciate you having me on. In terms of a word of encouragement, this might sound demeaning, but it's not. The only bottleneck or the only thing preventing you from where you want to go is you. That's it. And once you internalize that and realize that you are the creator of your reality and the only limit on your potential is you and the beliefs you hold, you create and you own enormous power over creating your future. You can go as far as you think you can. That's something that I've been wrestling with a lot recently in terms of like looking ahead, looking to people ahead of me and realizing that, maybe in some cases it's only a couple steps ahead. And the only thing stopping me from getting there would be limiting beliefs. And the same thing goes for anybody else. I mean, I started writing on here like a year ago with no idea what to do. And a year later, like I'm in a fortunate spot where I don't think I'll ever have to like go back to college or get a job. So that's a word of encouragement. Anybody could do it. You just have to be willing to stick in the game, and you only lose if you quit. If you stay in the arena, you can't lose. In terms of where can people find me, so the main one is X Jack Moses 0. If you shoot me a message there, I try to get to all of them. In my X link, I have a website, jackmoses.co. Which I just got up. And in there, you can find all my podcasts and my Telegram channel, as well as subscribe to my newsletter. So every Friday, I'm going to send, like I said earlier, pretty in-depth newsletter around something around peak performance or the creator economy. I might broaden that scope to more creator economy stuff. Like this morning, I wrote one about how to maintain mental health as a creator. So it's just basically anything that's top of mind for me in terms of how to navigate the creator economy. And then if you're interested in the cohort or working with me one-on-one, send me a message on X. I'll have more information about that in the newsletter too. But other than that, that's enough self-promo. I don't have too much else.
No, it's amazing, man. Guys, make sure you're keeping a very close eye on Jack. We didn't mention this. He's only 22 years old. So a ton of life experience, ton of business execution. Love to see it, man. Super grateful that you were able to spend some time with me today. Thanks again.
Likewise, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.